And so then I volunteered to do this so I get to hear more stories. So the first thing I'll do is I'll introduce myself, and then we'll introduce you, and then I can ask you a few questions to get you started. But
okay.
You can talk about whatever you want.
Very good.
Really.
Do you want me to start right from the beginning and through, or what? Because I have a tale to tell at the beginning.
All right. Well, you can just start right with that, and then
Okay.
if there's a lull, then I'll ask you some questions.
Okay.
How's that? But
Okay.
if you can talk for the entire 45 minutes, you can do that.
I'm not a talker, really.
All right. Well, I'll help you along then. But you can start with your first story. Let me introduce myself first. I'm Vicky Johnson, and I'm at the 10th Mountain Division Reunion in Denver on August 5th, 2007. And I'm speaking with...
Ray Josephson.
And what unit were you in, Ray?
Beg pardon?
What unit were you in?
Company H87.
Okay. And go ahead and
And
tell
I'm
us.
from Farmington, Connecticut, on the New England States. And
Go ahead.
I grew up in Connecticut. Of course, my folks came over from Sweden, and I was kind of Hovian. And of course, we did a lot of skiing when we were kids all the time, a lot of skiing. And of course, I belonged to the National Ski Patrol. And then when, who was that? Minnie Dole talked to the War Office in starting a mountain troop. Of course, I belonged to the mountain troop, or the association, and of course, we found out about it right away. And of course, right away, we said, we got to get into the outfit. Of course, they needed 3 letters of recommendation. And of course, I got the 3 letters of recommendation. And I was accepted to enter into the 87th Mountain Regiment. There was only one regiment started then. And of course, I worked at Pratt Whitney, and I handed my resignation. I wanted to quit because I wanted to go into the service. And of course, the next thing I knew, the draft board called me in, and I went to Fort Devens, I guess, in Massachusetts. And I showed them that I was accepted in the mountain troops. They said, guess what? They're not recruiting. They suspended for a while. So I said, well, why not hold me up till they start again? Oh, no, you go. So the next thing I knew, I was down in Miami Beach. The Air Force had taken over all the hotels there. And of course, we ran a lot of tests there, and they knew I was good with the guns and hunting and stuff, so we got a place for you. The next thing I knew, I was out here at Buckley Field in armament school. So 3 months, or 2 months of armament school here at Buckley, and that involved, ammunitions and guns at all the airship or airplanes. And then I said, where am I going to go after this? And guess what? I went right back to Westover Field in Mass, which is right near my home. And I got into the 340th Fighter Squadron. And we had P-47s, the Thunderbolt, and we had Thunderbolt aircraft, and they had 4 caliber 50s in each wing, and that's what I was in charge of. But our planes were at Bradley Field and Windsor Locks, but we got kind of crowded, so we moved over to Greenfield in Providence. And then we did our jobs, that they flew over, tow targets over the ocean, and we made sure the ammunition's okay. But it was sort of wintertime, so we all worked out of the hangar, the maintenance guys and everyone, all the groups that were involved with flying the aircraft. And of course, back in those days, gasoline was scarce, you couldn't get it because it was, anyway, it was hard to get anyway. It was rationed it was. I don't know whether I should be telling you this.
Oh, this is great. I can't wait to hear how you ended up in the 10th fight.
Well, anyway, they let me drive back and forth. So I got my car, an old 40 station wagon, and I went every weekend, I guess. I drove home. But the guys said, well, gee, we got 100 octane gas here for the planes. Why don't you, just in case you run out, why don't you take a 5-gallon or a 2-gallon can of gas in the back? And, I sort of hesitated. I said, well, what do you got to lose? You might run out somewhere and you probably need it. But what happened is these guys in the hangar, because gas was scarce, they were finagling the 100 octane out into their cars, and I think they were taking it home, and their friends were siphoning the gas out, and that's what they were doing for quite a while. And all of a sudden they got caught at it. And of course, they didn't have to tell them that I had a small amount of gas in the car, but they told them that I was involved. Of course, here was the evidence right there in the car. Well, we didn't get anything severely, or what do you call it? I don't know.
You weren't disciplined?
Not disciplined, that's all, not really bad. But that turned me off on them. I said, gee, I got to get out. They didn't have to tell on because I had that little gas in the car. So I got to get out of this outfit. So I said, where do I turn to now? And like in the Army, they say, go see the chaplain. So I did. I went to the chaplain. He was a skier. He said, look, I'll get you out of here. And within a week, he did. He got I went out to Camp Hale, Colorado. Within a week, he got out of the outfit. So I went to Camp Hale, Colorado. This was in April 43. Yeah, 43. And of course, I got there and they said, you have to go down and get your equipment at the supply building. And I said, okay. So I went down there to pick up my winter clothing. And at the end, they handed me a 5-foot pair of snowshoes, trail shoes. I said, look, I went to much trouble if you had a snowshoes. I came here to ski. So they said, you go up to battalion headquarters, you talk to them up there, and if you want to, we could transfer you to the rifle company. They have skis. So the fellow up there, he was knowledgeable too. He said, go back and talk to your first sergeant. He's still down there. Talk to him and see what you want to do. And I did. He was a nice guy. He was an old timer. He said, I'll tell you something. If you're in a rifle company, you're in the front of the hill. If you're in a heavy weapons company, you're in the back of the hill. Well, that convinced me. I didn't know anything about combat infantry, the setup, heavy weapons company, riflemen, and battalions, and all that stuff. But I soon learned. But so I decided I would accept the snowshoes as part of my equipment. Then he told me my outfit was up the hill further on maneuvers, or a big bivouac or something. And, I was there only a couple of days in the 9,000 feet or something, and I could run 25 feet, fall on my face. They said, well, you have to go up, your company's up there. I said, I'm not going to make it. And we have a mule train going up with supplies. Go down and talk to that mule skinner. And I did. Very nice guy he was. He says, I'll tell you what, I'm going up with the mule train tomorrow, 4 or 5. I'll put my pet mule in the back. Now, this is the truth. I'll put my pet mule in the back, you hold on to his tail, and I will take more often breaks so you can stay with us. Real nice, and it really worked out. I got up to where they were bivouacked. And that is the truth, though. That really happened. And I got up there and joined it, and they were happy to see me up there, of course. They got a recruit. Well, we came back down to Camp Hale, of course, and then we had maneuvers and exercise and runs and all that activity. And I did make expert in the M1 carbine and the 81 mortar, the big one. And that's the platoon I was with, in the mortar platoon. But then we were only there a couple months. They said, we're moving out. I just got there. They said, we're going to Fort Ord, California, sea level. So we went to Fort Ord, California. And of course, it's a Marine sort of training base. And so we had Marine training up and down the nets and forced marches, and I never was so in condition in my life. But then we had training sessions where we got on the transport, went down the nets with our equipment and landed on the landing barges. It's just, I don't know what the name of the towns were, close by Carmel or something. We did a couple of close by, and then the third one was going to be a major one. This is just a test, you know, or you used to know how to do it. So the last one was down in San Diego. We landed at Coronado Island. It's just off of San Diego. And of course, we had our troop ships and entered the landing craft and came in ashore. But I think half the people didn't know that we were going to do it. I think they thought we were Japs. But anyway, we got over that. So we got on the ships in the harbor again, and we were going to be there for a couple of days. And the Navy said, well, if you want to go to shore, we'll take you to shore and take you back if you want to go. So some of the Navy guys said, well, why don't you go? We'll take you over and back. And we got over there, 3 or 4 of us, and they convinced us we should go down over the border into Mexico and try the tequila. So we rented a taxi, and he drove us down there. And of course, we had a couple of tequilas, whatever it was, that special wine. And I don't remember a thing. I just passed out. I don't remember getting back at all. But we made it back because I think a lot of people, outsiders, helped us because they knew the condition we were in. We made it back onto the boat again. The Navy waited for it to come back. Then I don't know. I'm kind of misty whether we went the boat back to Fort Ord or we entered the train back to Fort Ord. And then, of course, a short while after, they said we're moving out again. And we entered the trains in the darkness, and we went to San Diego under cover of darkness, and we got on the ship there in San Diego Harbor. And then we got on the ships there, and of course, when it got daybreak, here we are right next to Alcatraz. It was right there in the harbor. And we were there for a couple of days, I think. Then we finally went out through the harbor, and we finally found out where we were going. We thought we were going to South Pacific. We couldn't figure any mountains down there. Then we were told we were going to Kiska and Aleutians. But they also told us that the Japs had these 2 islands, Attu and Kiska, and we had just recently taken Attu, and there was a lot of people, a lot of fellows were really killed, you know, and we were going to take the other one. I think they figured the Japanese were going to take those islands, come in through Alaska and come down at us, and that's why I think why they built the Alaskan Highway, because they thought the Japs were going to come in up that way, take over Alaska first. And they did bomb Dutch Harbor, you know, and they did. Anyway, we went out of the harbor and started up towards, was Adak, was one of the islands in further where we landed to get it used to what we're going to combat, the kind of territory. And I can remember it got kind of foggy all the time too when we were on I don't know how many days it took us to get up there. We went directly to Adak, and they were one of the islands. And what I can remember is that there were a few Jap subs, you know, or planes, and I can remember an airship or a dirigible or something with lines or wires hanging down from it in case they wanted to bomb it, they'd hit the wires. I don't know whether that's true or not, but I had that impression. And of course, going over once in a while, we see a boat come in, and what the heck is this? And a destroyer would come alongside and get more gas or something. Well, we finally got to Adak, and that sun came out, and we got off the ship, and we tried a few runs on the tundra. Of course, there's nothing to hide behind. You're right out in the open. And oh, brother, what are we getting into? Well, then we found out we were going to break off. We were going on the Kiska. And I think there were Alaskan troops and Canadian troops, and there was more than just 87th Regiment. But they broke us up into battalions, and each battalion landed at a different area of the island. And by that time, I was in reconnaissance. So we had to go to ashore with a rifleman, because if they ran into trouble, we could call back and get the mortars to fire up ahead or somewhere. And the time came when we landed. It was clear. I don't remember the dates, or I could give them to you, but you can fill it in. Anyway, we landed, and there wasn't any firing, and nothing opposed us, and we got started up the hill, and we knew what the objective was, get up to the first, straight up, and then when you get to the little flat, that's our first objective. And by that time, we had a buddy system where we landed. We were paired off. And so the second Lieutenant Peterman, he was in charge of our mortar platoon, so he and I went ashore with the riflemen, because we're in a recon group. And so as soon as we started up, we went with the riflemen, and they were right there with us. And pretty soon it got so foggy that we lost contact with them, and we didn't know where they were. And so the second lieutenant said, "Hey, well, we got an objective. We're going to go up to that flat area, and let's just keep going uphill until we get the heck with the riflemen." They're doing the same thing, so they'll be up there. We got up to that level area, and somebody was shooting at us. I don't know how we found out that they were friendly troops. The riflemen had gotten up there already. But this second Lieutenant Peterman, in a blizzard, just recently told about that first shot that was fired, and he mentioned his name as being the one who got up there on that top of that ridge and fired at. But he didn't mention that I was with him. Because we were buddies. Anyway, we survived that. And of course, we didn't know the Japs had taken off either. We wondered how come there was some firing. 18 fellows got shot and were shooting each other. You can't help it. Every war, I guess, that happens. And so I think the rumor was that the Japs had pulling off on purpose. They pulled all out. You've probably heard that story several times. And we figured they're going to let us land, and then they're going to counterattack us. So they sent us, everybody, the groups of 3 had to go up to the high points and observe, to see if we spotted them coming in, we could let people know. So I think we were out there for 2 or 3 days at each outpost. Of course, we had few rations, maybe. Luckily, we had a sea ration or something. But anyway, we finally found out that they weren't going to come back, and they were gone for sure. But the rations, I can remember, you probably heard this before, the guys were throwing grenades in the pools, and up come half a dozen salmon. And I didn't like salmon cooked on a charcoal. Anyway, then they brought in the criminal, I can't even say it right, the big tents. Of course, the Aleutians are noted for their wind, the willy-waws, they used to call them. And they blew maybe 60 miles an hour all the time, almost seems like. And of course, all the tents blew over as soon as they set them up. So finally, they got equipment in there, and they dug them down halfway into the ground so the wind wouldn't blow them down. But that's tundra and muck. So what do we do now? We're not all walking in the muck. But the beaches were all not sandy, they were full of these little round stone. So the bulldozers, or the backhoes, or whatever they were, we covered every road and every trail, every tent where you walked, where we had stone to keep us from walking in the mud. And that was a heck of a job. It took quite a while. Every mess tent and everything had this little pebble stones. She would be walking in the mud. That was quite a job too. And by that time they had, the tents, the mess tents were in. All our equipment was there. But then it started to get October, I guess, and it started to get a little cold. So they brought in these little pot-bellied stoves. And so what are we going to burn in them? Because there's no trees or no wood. But the Navy decided they would get us some coal to come in, coal for the stoves. Okay. So by that time we had a temporary dock built, and they pull up there, and they were supposed to unload the coal on the dock. We were going to pick them up and get them out to the different tents that had the stoves. And I said, we're not unloading them. If you want the coal, you got to come on board and take the coal off. We thought the Navy, that was a bad thing, but we did. We needed the coal, so we unloaded the coal from the barge. And I guess it was November, or maybe late October, we got word we were going back to the States. So we all went over the hill to the main harbor where the boats came in. And then we got on a little tour boat, Alaskan Turbo. It wasn't a big one, but it was a sort of small one. We were on that, and we're coming back into Ketchikan on the southern tip of Alaska. We rounded the Aleutian chain, and I've never seen the ocean like that one. They were round waves, and not 30, 40 feet high, and you got down in that, and you could look at that big round mold. Whew, what is this of that little boat? But they never broke over it, just that round, undulating waves. Well, eventually we got to Ketchikan, and we gassed up or oiled up where they do. We came down the inland passageway. And of course, we came in the closest in. The guy knew what he was doing because he's probably made this trip several times before, the guy that captained the ship. And of course, they were afraid of the Japs outside, so they wanted to stay in close. And that was the most enjoyable ride I ever had because we had staterooms, and the meals were served. And of course, all the wildlife, you're right there. You're going several feet off the bank of some of the things. Well, we got into Seattle, and then we went to Camp Carson. At Camp Carson, we went back up to Hale. Of course, by that time, there were two other regiments up there, formed the 85th and 86th. And so we were the 87th, and that three regiments, so that made we could call ourselves a division. And that's when the 10th Mountain Division started, when the three were there. I think the 90th was there, hoping, they told us if we survived Kiska, 80% of us wouldn't make it. So they were preparing ahead in case we didn't. The 90th, I think the 90th, there was a Norwegian or something outfit. Anyway, they were going to take over the 87th in case we didn't, enough guys came back. They moved out someplace else, and we came in. Oh, what was it? Well, Camp Hale is at Pando, and, there's not near any big cities except Leadville, and they told us not to go there because the girls were not the right type or something. But they would let you have a car, provided you went to Denver or anywhere else, you took a complete car full. So by that time I had a furlough, so I went home, and my other neighbor had gotten into the 85th while I was gone up in the Kiska Island. And he had a furlough coming too, so we both went at the same time to Farmington in Connecticut. And then we decided to go back together, and I'd bring my 1940 wagon back, and we were going to drive continuously. Of course, I fell asleep, and the van tipped over in the gutter. We didn't get hurt, but it got a little damage. But the Red Cross were right there right away, and they said Ken couldn't get an extension, so that was Ken Swanson. He was a C Company 85th. So he had to take a train by himself back the rest of the way, and I had to wait till the car was repaired. So I drove the rest of the way back to Camp Hale. And of course, I had the car there, and so every weekend I could go into Denver, and I did go into Denver every weekend almost. But I had to take a full carload 2, 4, 6, 7 guys. And of course you had to go over the Continental Divide, and then it was gravel, that maybe 3, 4 miles either side of the peak because of the dangerous slippery conditions. We went, but several times because of the weight, I get a flat tire and it cracked the rim, because the weight. But we always had a spare, and the guys, it took about 2 seconds to change the. Then we had the rims braced, and a couple times that happened. What's next?
We might be about halfway through or so. So you might want to think about what other stories you want to tell so we don't run out of time.
Okay.
I presume that you went to Italy.
Yes, we went down to Camp Swift first and trained there. And the heat, that was terrible. And then we went to Patrick Henry, I guess, in Virginia, and we took the boats across and landed, I don't know, some dock down the southern part of, and we had to get off on a sunken ship because you couldn't get in close with it. And of course, the guys were told not to make sure they didn't have any ammunition in their rifles. So this one guy fell, and the rifle went off. If all the times he really got shot down. Oh, we made it up to where we were going to fight, and of course we got up in the front line, and I don't know if people told you that there were big searchlights up in back hills in back of us. No, you couldn't get around in the daytime because you'd get the Germans were looking right down at you. But these spotlights were shown out over us towards the German lines, and of course at night you could maneuver under these lights because it was light enough to maneuver without them seeing you. Of course, we only had dim lights on the Jeeps and the equipment we had. I thought that was sort of different. Anyway, our company, the riflemen wanted to find out just where the Germans were up in the front line. So that's okay. So the riflemen were going to do it at night, a night party. And we had a 50 caliber machine gun in our heavy weapons company, and my good friend was in charge of that. And he wanted a couple of guys to go with him, and of course they set it out in the open because they figured it's going to be a night operation, so we could get back. They'd come back, but they didn't come back in time. And of course, by that time it was light, and you could see where they were firing at our party. And of course, we opened up with a caliber 50, and of course every fifth projectile is lighted, so that's the only way you sighted a 50 caliber. You could see where the light. And of course, as soon as the Germans saw that, they knew where we were too. So they opened up with these little 30 millimeter mortars, and they were dropping all around us, and there was 3 or 4 of us, and we got word, get the heck back, leave the gun there. I don't know how we made it back, but no one got hit, and they were dropping the ground all around us. Well, then the company H, was involved, and I was still in reconnaissance. Let me see. Well, you probably heard the stories how the war went over there.
I'm more interested in your experiences.
But back at the barracks, we were still training at Fort Camp Hale. The battalion operations sergeant had time off, so they called me up to replace him during the operations department, and so during this fighting over there, he got wounded or something, so they called me in to be with the barracks headquarters. So I got in with barracks headquarters, and of course it was in a Jeep all the time, and I lost contact with our heavy weapons platoon. And of course everybody later said, "Where the heck did you go? Did you chicken out or what?" And I told them I got called into battalion headquarters. The only thing I remember about that is, of course, then we weren't really involved with the fighting, but we were right up front. And this was after they'd broken out into the Po Valley, and the battalion commander and our little group in jeeps, we got out onto the highway there and figured that our troops were up ahead of us somewhere, and we went along this highway, and finally we stopped the battalion. He said, "Jesus, you're way ahead of the Germans. They're back of you." Anyway, it didn't take long. We pulled off and waited for some of our own troops that came up. And then, of course, crossing the Po, they had rubber boats right away for us. We paddled across. You see them pictures now. They had motorized barges or boats, and we had to paddle across. And of course, the Germans weren't no fools either. They had these 88s, and they were firing overhead, and they had them set so they'd go off up in the air before they hit the ground. So that was a bad thing too, because we were hoping we wouldn't get one of those bursts over, so we never would have made it. Of course, you know the rest. I went.
So you came through the war without any wounds?
No, lucky.
Lucky guy. What was the most scared you were?
I shouldn't tell you this. Well, it's one of the times we had rest time. We decided to climb this peak. And it was really a really high peak. And someone told me I shouldn't try it with a couple other guys. Well, going up, you know, if you're a mountain climber, it's easier going up. But coming back, I swore to myself, I'm never going to make this. That was the scariest point, even though fighting in the war. Well, we made it. But that was I really thought I was never going to make that. I shouldn't be telling that because that's not.
That's okay. That's okay. So what was the most difficult thing about being in the 10th? Was it the training? Was it?
Oh, the training, I'm sure, was a lot. I shouldn't say that either. That D series, you know, you probably heard a lot about that. That was awful. We got up there and we had to walk up the road higher to get in a certain elevation in the mountain there. And of course, the mess truck came up with us. And they're going to last meal, and then we're going into the boondocks and stay in there for a month, I guess, or a month and a half. But they gave us our last meal from the truck, the mess truck, and we had metal mess kits, you know, and we went up and got our food, and we got sat in the snow or somewhere. And I think I can remember we had cans of pear or something in our, and by the time we got around to it, it was solid. It was about 30 below that first time night. You probably heard that before too, and it really was. Of course, up there it was rough in that snow, and that was a humdinger too. But that was bad enough, you know. We'd crawl, and sometimes we had one-man or two-man tents or mountain tents, and we'd crawl in there, and you know, your feet would get sweaty, or your socks, and you bring them in the bed with you to sleep on them, hoping they'd warm up or dry up a little bit, and of course it never worked. And the worst part about that was so many people were not making it, they were getting sick, that they decided to cut it off. So we went back to the barracks. They wouldn't let us go into the barracks. We had to put our pup tents in the field, lined up in the field, and we had to sleep there. We could go in and probably get a meal or shower, but we had to live in those tents at night to make up for the month or a month and a half we were supposed to stay out. The Army regulations said we had to be out for that length of time, so we had to. That's why they had to do it that way. We thought that was kind of ridiculous. But we survived that too.
When the war ended, did you go to Yugoslavia or Austria?
No, I didn't. We didn't partake in that.
Where did you go?
I don't know. We had a rest camp somewhere in there, until we got word to go back. We're coming back. Of course, we had breaks every now and then, a couple of days off, and we went to, they took us to Venice or someplace for a few days, or rest camps. They were rest camps. Then we had guys that were wounded in different hospitals. We'd go and visit them. Well, talking about heavy weapons coming being in the back and the rifleman in their head, you know, we a lot of ridges that we had to capture, but there was a couple of days maybe before we went to the next one. And of course, the Germans were smart too. They laid down these mines. They knew where we were going to cross. I can remember one ridge we were at, and with the riflemen, and we knew darn well that whole thing was covered with mines. You know, and the poor riflemen had to go, and you felt sorry for them because they knew darn well someone weren't going to make it. But we had signal guys or something that followed them with either a white string or this white powder stuff, and marked the line so the rest of us could follow that line through the field so nobody else would get clever. I thought that was pretty neat. Well, of course, then we left there, and we were coming back on the boat, and they heard we were going to go to Japan. But then the war ended when we got back home.
And did you stay in the service then, or what?
No. We went back to Camp Carson, and of course we had to wait for our points. We made points for how much time we were in and stuff, and I didn't have quite enough points or something, so I have to wait a few more months. So a lot of us went to work up in Denver in the freight yards and earned a few bucks on the side until our official orders came through to quit.
So I always like to ask people, how do you think being in the 10th Mountain Division or your experiences during the war affected the rest of your life? What kind of a difference did it make in your life, what you've been through?
Well, camaraderie, mostly, because, you know, you were so close to these guys and you're best friends, and, you know, we always made an attempt to make the reunions because they were really close then. I think that was very important because they were a really great bunch of guys. Even the officers, you know, they were really good guys. And of course, I don't know, I'm sure it had a lot to do with what you did with the rest of your life, you know, because you always had that in mind. You couldn't forget it completely. But of course, I came through without any bullet holes or anything, and that was something I call lucky. Like, the good Lord blessed you or something. So I started going to church every Sunday. I still do, but, you know, it's just, how do you count for this fellow didn't make it? And I did. I don't know. It's hard to explain that.
Are there any other stories from your time that you want to tell us?
I guess I told you all the. Well,
Any stories you've told your family but you haven't told me yet?
I don't think I even told my family these stories.
Any secret stories?
No. Well, in Denver, I did have a girlfriend there, though, but not, you know, not real serious, but nice gal. Of course, we wrote afterwards, back and forth for a while, and then it was too far separation.
Did you use any of your ski training at all?
No, I didn't. No.
Or your snowshoes?
Well, of course, I had snowshoes at home and skis at home, and of course, we did a lot of that afterwards too. Our supply sergeant, he worked at the Stowe lift, so we used to go up there and stay with him, and of course he'd get us on the lift right away, and, and we used to ski there, of course, 3 or 4 of us, and we had a couple bottles of wine down in the car, and we'd have a few sips, and but you know, no one ever got hurt. No one twisted an ankle, or no one got hurt all those times we went up there. I think the wine relaxed us.
Well, we've got just 3 or 4 more minutes. If you've got anything there, you might look at your notes and see if there's anything else you want to say.
I meant to go over them before I went to this religious ceremony there, and they went kind of long. It was a nice one, though. Well, I never checked up on this. They stopped recruiting for a while. I never did check up if that was true or not. That's something I haven't done to this day. But, you know, to get in the armament, and it came right here in Denver, Buckley Field, too. It was, the armament school was. Then how I got out with the gas in the car. But I enjoyed working on the planes, and of course everybody when they're younger wanted to be a flyer. Well, that's all, I guess, unless you have some other questions I ask.